Zachary had never imagined that a routine mission would turn into one of the most awkward moments of his life. He had been on countless space assignments before, traveling from planet to planet, completing tasks, and never once had anything seemed unusual. But this one was different. The human soldier had no idea that his next mission would involve alien companions of the strangest kind. Zachary was stationed at a bustling spaceport, known as the gateway to the galaxy's most important missions. He stood in the crowd, surrounded by alien soldiers and officers of various species. They walked in a hurry, each with their own tasks, paying no attention to the human who had just stepped off the transport ship. "Zachary," called a familiar voice from behind him. He turned to see his commanding officer, Captain Daria, approaching. Daria was an experienced officer in the Galactic Federation, and her reputation was known across many systems. She gave Zachary a sharp nod, signaling him to follow her. "Welcome to Durana Station, soldier," she said briskly as they walked down the long corridor. "You're about to be assigned to a special mission." Zachary had heard of Durana Station. It was the place where new recruits were sent for assignments that involved galactic diplomacy, alien relations, and even peacekeeping efforts. He had never expected to find himself here. "What's this special mission, ma'am?" Zachary asked, a little nervous. He had been hoping for a straightforward task, nothing too complicated. After all, he was just a soldier, not some ambassador. Captain Daria paused for a moment, her face unreadable. "You've been selected for a very important and unique role. Due to certain factors regarding human nature, you'll be paired with 2 companions during your mission." Zachary blinked in confusion. "Companions? What kind of companions?" The captain's expression remained serious. "Human physiology has specific urges that sometimes affect your interactions with other species. For the sake of your well-being and the mission's success, we've assigned you 2 small alien companions." Zachary's brow furrowed. "Companions? But I'm a soldier. What do I need companions for?" "You'll understand soon enough," Captain Daria said, her tone giving nothing away. "Come with me." They entered a nearby office, and Zachary could feel his curiosity and confusion growing. Inside the room stood 2 creatures. They were small, no taller than his waist, and both had distinctly alien features. One of them, the first to catch his attention, looked like a floating insect. Its body was slender, with glowing patterns running along its transparent wings. The wings fluttered silently, making soft whirring noises. It had large, black eyes that stared directly at him, and it seemed to be observing him intently. The second companion was even stranger. It was a tiny creature with 4 delicate wings, its body covered in shimmering scales. The wings were translucent, but they sparkled in the light. It had a round, almost chubby shape and was clearly nervous, constantly darting its gaze around the room. It seemed more jittery than the insectoid creature. "This is Treshka," Captain Daria said, pointing to the insectoid alien. "And this is Lyra," she gestured to the winged creature. "They've been assigned to you to ensure that you remain in good health and complete your mission successfully." Zachary took a cautious step back. "Wait, what do you mean by remain in good health?" Daria sighed, as though this was a conversation she had had many times before. "Human mating instincts are different from those of other species. Your physiology requires certain emotional interactions to stay balanced. Treshka and Lyra will act as your companions, providing the support necessary to maintain your emotional stability." Zachary looked at the 2 tiny aliens again, still in disbelief. "Emotional stability? You're telling me these 2 will keep me from whatever mating urges you think I have?" "They're specially chosen and adapted for this role," Captain Daria explained. "It's a part of a broader study on human emotional response. By having these companions with you, the Federation can monitor how humans interact with other species in more personal and emotional ways." Zachary could hardly believe what he was hearing. He had been assigned to work with 2 tiny aliens to control his emotions. This was absurd. He wasn't some experimental subject. He was a soldier. Why me? He finally asked. Why was I selected for this? Captain Daria's eyes softened for a moment, but only briefly. You're a strong candidate because of your psychological profile. We believe that you have the resilience needed for the mission. The Federation is testing how different environments, including emotional bonds, can influence human behavior in alien settings. These companions will help keep you focused on your duties, while also allowing for more intimate understanding between you and alien species. Zachary didn't know how to respond. He felt a wave of frustration rise in him. This was not what he signed up for. I don't need anyone to help with my emotions, he muttered under his breath. Captain Daria raised an eyebrow. Regardless of your thoughts on the matter, the assignment stands. You'll report to the training room immediately. Get used to their presence. You'll be working closely with them. With a small gesture, Captain Daria turned and left the room, leaving Zachary alone with the two tiny companions. They hovered near him, their big eyes watching him carefully. Treshka chirped softly, as if trying to make him feel more at ease. Lyra, on the other hand, continued to dart about, her wings buzzing nervously. Zachary ran a hand through his hair, sighing in frustration. This is crazy, he muttered to himself. But as he looked at the little aliens, he couldn't help but feel a strange sense of responsibility. He had no idea how he was going to make it through this mission, but one thing was certain. This was going to be a very different experience. Zachary's first few days aboard the Durrani station were nothing like what he had imagined. He had thought he'd be sent on missions, battling alien forces or exploring uncharted planets. Instead, he found himself stuck in a strange, sterile room with two tiny alien companions floating around him. Get used to them, Zachary, Captain Daria had said when she left him alone with Treshka and Lyra. They're not just here for your emotional stability. They're here for a reason. You'll find out soon enough. He wasn't sure if he should be angry, confused, or just resigned to his strange new reality. But as the days went by, he realized there was little he could do. Treshka and Lyra weren't going anywhere. At first, he avoided them as much as possible. He didn't know how to interact with them or what to say. They were alien. He couldn't even begin to understand their behavior. Treshka, the insectoid one, spent most of the time hovering near him, clicking and chirping in what seemed to be a constant stream of excited noises. The creature didn't seem to rest, always moving about, gathering things from his room, whether it was useful or not. Sometimes it would try to bring Zachary strange, glowing stones or other items it had found from the station. Lyra, on the other hand, was more quiet and reserved. She would dart from place to place, her wings buzzing nervously. Zachary noticed that she seemed to be observing him more than interacting with him. Whenever he made eye contact, she would look away quickly, as if embarrassed by something. One morning, after an awkward silence between the three of them, Zachary decided to try talking to Treshka. Maybe he could learn a little more about these strange creatures assigned to him. So, what's your deal, Treshka? Zachary said, his voice low as he glanced at the hovering alien. Treshka chirped back at him and floated closer, its large black eyes staring at him with curious intensity. It held out a small rock it had found, making soft clicking sounds. Zachary sighed, trying to make sense of it. Okay, I get it. You're giving me a gift? He asked, unsure of the alien's intention. To his surprise, Treshka floated, even closer, as if pleased by Zachary's response. It made a series of soft, happy clicks and gently placed the rock on the table in front of him. Zachary picked it up, holding it in his palm. The stone glowed softly, its color shifting between blue and green. Thanks, I guess, he muttered, unsure of what to do with the gift. He set it aside, not wanting to offend Treshka, but also not knowing what he was supposed to do with an alien rock. Lyra, who had been watching the exchange from the corner of the room, suddenly flitted over and landed on the edge of the table. Her tiny wings buzzed rapidly as she tilted her head, watching Zachary carefully. Zachary looked at her, noticing for the first time how delicate she seemed. Her shimmering scales reflected the light in a way that was almost beautiful, and he couldn't help but feel a strange pull toward her. He quickly shook off the thought. What was wrong with him? You okay? Zachary asked, trying to sound casual. Lyra seemed to hesitate for a moment, then nodded. Her wings fluttered once, as if trying to reassure him. Zachary wasn't sure, but it felt like she understood what he said. Her silence made him wonder about her. Was she capable of speaking? Was it just that her communication was different from his? I guess we'll have to get along, huh? Zachary said, more to himself than to her. He had no choice. Whether he liked it or not, these two were going to be part of his life for the foreseeable future. As the day wore on, Zachary began to notice something strange. He found himself thinking about the companions more than he cared to admit. Treshka's constant movement, Lyra's quiet observation. It was all becoming oddly comforting. He even found himself looking forward. As the days turned into weeks aboard Doranus Station, Zachary's life with his alien companions became more routine. What had started as an odd, forced arrangement was slowly transforming into something he hadn't expected. He had to admit, Treshka and Lyra were starting to feel more like part of his life than a mere assignment. He found himself looking forward to the mornings when he would wake up to find Treshka already bouncing around his quarters, chirping happily and nudging at things. Lyra, though more reserved, had started to settle down beside him when he sat, for his meals, watching him quietly. It was strange how quickly he had adapted. His first instinct was to resist the situation. He had wanted to ignore them, to pretend they weren't there. But now, he couldn't imagine his days without them. He had started to feel protective of them, especially Lyra, whose nervous energy seemed to settle whenever he was near. Treshka, however, was a constant whirlwind. It would hover around him constantly, bringing him objects it thought were interesting. These ranged from the bizarre, like a small glowing stone it had found during its exploration of the station, to the downright useless, like bits of metal, scrap that it seemed to cherish. One evening, Zachary was sitting by the window looking out into the vast expanse of space. He found comfort in the silence of his quarters. Lyra had flown up to the high shelf where she usually perched, watching him from above. Treshka was on the floor, playing with a small, shiny object it had found. Zachary couldn't help but smile at the sight. Despite the absurdity of it all, there was something calming about their presence. It wasn't just about being assigned to care for them. It was about the companionship they provided in their own strange way. "Are you guys ever going to sit still?" he asked, half laughing. As Treshka zoomed past him, Treshka made a clicking sound almost like laughter, and flitted away to another part of the room. Lyra's wings fluttered as she tilted her head, giving Zachary a look that almost seemed like an apology. "You know, I think you both are starting to grow on me," Zachary muttered, though he wasn't sure if they could understand him. Still, Lyra seemed to respond, gently flying down and landing beside him on the table. She made a soft cooing sound as if agreeing with him. The more he spent time with them, the more Zachary began to understand them in ways he couldn't explain. It wasn't just their strange behavior. It was something about the way they looked at him, the way they interacted with him. It felt as though they trusted him, and in return he found himself wanting to protect them, even though they were the ones assigned to look after him. One morning, after a quiet breakfast, Zachary decided to venture out of his quarters for the first time in days. The station was vast, and as much as he'd grown used to his new routine, the emptiness of the hallways sometimes felt overwhelming. He was assigned to a few routine tasks, but mostly, he spent time working with his companions, getting to know them better. When he entered the central area of the station, he was surprised to see a group of officers gathered, talking in hushed voices. Captain Daria, standing at the center, waved him over. "Zachary, come here," she called. Her voice was sharp but not unkind. Zachary hesitated for a moment, glancing at Treshka and Lyra, who were both fluttering by his side. It seemed like they always followed him, even outside of their assigned rooms. The sight was almost comforting now. "Captain, what's going on?" Zachary asked as he walked over. "There's something you need to know," Captain Daria said. Her face was serious, though there was an air of something else beneath her stern exterior. She lowered her voice as she spoke again. "Your mission, along with the others like it, is part of a larger study. We've been observing how humans bond with alien species, specifically in emotional terms, but we're reaching a critical stage. In the research, Zachary frowned. What do you mean? The emotional connections that humans form are more complex than we originally thought. You've likely noticed that your attachment to Treshka and Lyra has grown stronger. She paused. It's not just you. The others have experienced the same thing. Zachary glanced down at the two tiny aliens beside him. They were watching him closely as if they understood the conversation taking place. He felt his stomach tighten. I didn't sign up for this. I'm just supposed to help with the mission, not form bonds? Captain Daria interrupted, her voice softer now. The bonds are part of the process. It's not just about your emotional needs, it's about understanding how humans can create bonds across species, even with those who are vastly different. Zachary was silent for a moment, thinking over her words. He hadn't signed up for any of this. When he had joined the Federation, he thought he was meant for a life of adventure and exploration, not some experiment. But the truth was, he had started to care for Treshka and Lyra in ways that weren't just because of the mission. There was something more. I never wanted to be part of some experiment, Zachary muttered. He glanced at Treshka and Lyra again. But they're not just companions. They've become part of my life. I can't ignore that. Captain, Daria's expression softened. That's exactly what we've been studying. The emotional connection, the attachment, and the way humans respond to the need for companionship, even in the most unusual circumstances. It's a phenomenon that could change how the Federation interacts with other species. Zachary looked down at his companions, feeling conflicted. Was this bond real, or was it all engineered? It felt real. He cared for them in a way he hadn't expected. They weren't just experiments to him anymore, they were friends. He felt a protectiveness over them, something that ran deeper than any assignment. He nodded slowly. So what happens now? Captain Daria hesitated before responding. Now, we begin phase 2 of the study. We'll need you to take part in a deeper integration process. The connections between humans and their assigned companions are stronger than we predicted, and it's essential to monitor these bonds as they develop. Zachary looked at her, his expression firm. You want me to keep working with them, don't you? She nodded. Yes. And I need you to continue forming your connection. It's essential to the success of the study. Zachary was quiet for a long moment. He glanced down at Treshka, who was fluttering around his feet, and at Lyra, who had flown up to perch on his shoulder. Their quiet presence seemed almost like a reassurance. All right, he said, the words coming slowly but decisively. I'll do what's necessary, but just know I'm not doing this because of some mission or study. I'm doing it because I care about them. Captain Daria gave him a sharp nod. That's all we need, Zachary. Now get ready. Phase 2 begins tomorrow. As Zachary left the room, he felt a mixture of emotions swirling within him. He was part of something much bigger than he had ever expected. The bond he had with Treshka and Lyra wasn't just a part of his mission. It had become something real, something that could not be ignored. Treshka buzzed around him, chirping excitedly. Lyra perched on his shoulder, nuzzling her tiny face against his neck in a gesture that seemed to say, "You're not alone." Zachary smiled softly, feeling a warmth spread through him. He wasn't alone. Not anymore. And maybe, just maybe, this bond was more important than he had originally thought. The days following Zachary's conversation with Captain Daria were filled with strange anticipation. He had agreed to participate in the next phase of the study, though the more he thought about it, the less certain he became of his role in the Federation's plans. It seemed that the emotional bond between him and his two tiny alien companions was deeper than anyone had expected. He had always prided himself on being in control, but the connection he felt with Treshka and Lyra was something he couldn't easily shake. Zachary found himself growing more and more protective of them, especially as he saw them interact with each other. Treshka had started to show signs of affection in its own way, hovering close to Zachary whenever he sat down, chirping happily and occasionally resting on his shoulder. Lyra, though more reserved, would sit quietly by his side, her gentle wings fluttering softly as if trying to comfort him without saying a word. He couldn't help but feel an undeniable bond, something he had never expected to develop. Despite his growing feelings for his companions, Zachary couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. It had been weeks since Captain Daria had told him about the true purpose of his mission, and he still felt like he was missing a critical piece of the puzzle. There was something the Federation wasn't telling him, something about the study and his companions that he didn't fully understand. He had to find out what it was. One afternoon, as he sat in his quarters, his thoughts consumed with curiosity, Treshka and Lyra were unusually quiet. Treshka, who usually flitted around aimlessly, was sitting in the corner, staring at a small datapad it had found. Lyra, too, seemed more still than usual, her wings barely making a sound as she sat on the windowsill watching the stars outside. Zachary's mind was racing. "What's going on?" he muttered to himself. He stood up and paced around the room, trying to shake off the feeling that something was wrong. Finally, he approached Treshka, who had been staring at the datapad for some time. "Treshka," Zachary said softly, his voice cautious, "what are you looking at?" The insectoid alien turned its large black eyes toward him, making a clicking sound. Then, to Zachary's surprise, it handed him the datapad. T. Zachary spent the next few days in a haze of confusion and determination. After his confrontation with Captain Daria, he had made a promise to himself that he wouldn't let the Federation use him or his companions for their experiments. But the weight of his decision was heavy. He had agreed to be part of something bigger, something he never fully understood, and now he was questioning everything. His life with Treshka and Lyra had changed. They were no longer just assigned companions. They were his friends, and he would protect them at all costs. But the more he thought about it, the more questions surfaced. If the Federation could manipulate emotions like they had done with him, what else were they hiding? What was their true agenda? Zachary couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story. The information he had discovered on the datapad, the one Treshka had given him, still weighed on his mind. He had barely scratched the surface of its meaning, but he knew it wasn't just a random series of codes. It had been a message, and it had been meant for him. That afternoon, as he sat alone in his quarters, his mind racing, Treshka and Lyra hovered near him, both of them sitting, quietly sensing his unease. Treshka made soft chirping noises trying to get his attention, while Lyra fluttered down and landed beside him. It was as if they knew he was struggling, as if they were trying to offer comfort in the only way they knew how. Zachary ran a hand through his hair, his eyes fixed on the datapad. It was still there, sitting on the table, the mysterious symbols staring back at him. "I need to figure this out," he muttered under his breath. There was no turning back now. He needed answers, not just for himself, but for Treshka and Lyra as well. His hand hovered over the datapad and he took a deep breath. The symbols weren't familiar to him, but there was something about them that felt important. He had to try again. This time he focused on the patterns, the way the symbols were arranged. Slowly, something clicked in his mind, a memory from one of his earlier training sessions. The patterns were similar to the encryption methods used by the Federation for high-security communications. "That's it," Zachary whispered. "It's a code." Excited by the discovery, he quickly tapped the screen, his fingers moving over the symbols as he began to break the code. His heart pounded in his chest as the symbols slowly transformed into readable text. It wasn't much, just a few lines, but it was enough to make his blood run cold. The message was short but clear. Phase 2 of the experiment. Emotional attachment is crucial. Continue with the assigned human and alien pairs. Failure to comply will result in termination of mission. Full integration required. Monitor the emotional response closely. The ultimate goal is unity between species. Zachary's mind raced as he processed the words. The Federation had known all along what they were doing. They weren't just testing human emotions, they were orchestrating the creation of bonds between humans and aliens. This wasn't about peace or diplomacy. This was about control. They wanted to see if they could manufacture emotional connections, and if they could, they would use those connections to further their own agenda. The words termination of mission echoed in his mind. What did that mean for Treshka and Lyra? If they didn't comply with the Federation's plan, would they be discarded? Would they be treated like nothing more than tools in a larger experiment? Zachary felt a surge of anger rise in his chest. He couldn't let that happen. Not to them, not to his friends. He was the one who had made a promise to protect them, and he wasn't about to break that promise now. He stood up abruptly, his fists clenched at his sides. Treshka and Lyra watched him, sensing the change in his mood. Zachary looked at them, his heart heavy with the weight of his decision. "I can't do this anymore," he said quietly. "I won't be part of this experiment, and I won't let them hurt you." Lyra fluttered over to him and perched on his shoulder, her tiny wings brushing against his cheek. Treshka floated close by, chirping softly as if to reassure him. They didn't fully understand the danger, but they understood his words. They trusted him. Zachary knew what he had to do. He had to escape. But the more he thought about it, the more complicated it seemed. The Federation wouldn't let them go so easily. If they found out what he was planning, they would send more soldiers, more agents. He had to act fast. "I need help," Zachary muttered to himself. He couldn't do this alone. He needed someone on the inside who could help him get Treshka, Lyra, and himself out of the Federation's reach. There had to be someone who had the courage to stand with him. He immediately thought of Lieutenant Carla, a fellow soldier he had met during his training days. Carla had always been different from the others. She questioned the Federation's methods and often spoke out about the way they handled assignments. Zachary had always respected her for her honesty and integrity. She might be the key to everything. He knew it wouldn't be easy to contact her. The Federation monitored all communications between personnel, especially when it came to sensitive matters. But Zachary was determined. He had come this far, and he wasn't going to back down now. He sat down at the communication terminal in his quarters and quickly typed in the code for a secure channel. The Federation had strict rules about unauthorized communication, but Zachary had learned enough about their systems to bypass most of their security measures. It took a few minutes, but eventually the screen flickered to life, revealing Carla's face. "Zachary?" she said, surprised. "What's going on? Why are you contacting me through a secure channel?" "I need your help," Zachary said, keeping his voice low. "It's about the mission, the truth about what we're doing. It's not what they told us." Carla's expression shifted from surprise to concern. "What do you mean?" "They're not just studying human-alien bonds," Zachary continued. "They're using us for something much bigger. They're trying to control us, manipulate our emotions, and create bonds between species for their own purposes. They're not going to let me go, Carla. They won't let Treshka or Lyra go either." Carla's eyes widened. "You're telling me they've been experimenting on us? Using us as part of some larger plan?" Zachary nodded. "I can't be part of this anymore. I won't let them hurt my friends. I need to get out of here, and I need your help to make that happen." There was a long pause. Carla looked around her quarters, as though making sure no one was listening. "I knew something was off about this mission," she said finally. "I never trusted their methods, but this is worse than I imagined." She leaned forward, her face serious. "I'll help you, Zachary, but it won't be easy. The Federation won't let you just walk away. They'll send people after you." "I know," Zachary said, "but I can't stay here. I'm not going to let them control me or Treshka and Lyra anymore. We're leaving." Carla nodded, her face hardening with resolve. "All right. We'll make a plan. I'll find a way to get you the supplies you need and make sure no one is watching. But you have to move quickly." "I will," Zachary said. "And thank you, Carla. I won't forget this." Carla gave him a grim smile. "Just don't get yourself caught. We're in this together now." As the communication ended, Zachary sat back in his chair, his heart pounding. He had a plan. He had help. And soon, he would be free. The Federation would no longer control his fate. He looked at Treshka and Lyra, who were watching him with their big eyes, trusting him. He would protect them, no matter the cost. Zachary spent the next few days preparing. He had already made his decision. He would escape the Federation's grasp and protect Treshka and Lyra. He knew the risks, but the thought of staying under their control was unbearable. He had contacted Carla, and she had promised to help. She was a skilled officer, and if anyone could find a way to get them out, it was her. But Zachary knew that time was running out. The longer he stayed on Durana's station, the more likely it was that someone would catch wind of his plan. He had to move quickly. Treshka and Lyra sensed his unease. The two tiny aliens had been quieter than usual, their usual energy subdued as if they could feel the tension in the air. Zachary didn't know if they understood what was happening, but he could tell they trusted him completely. Their bond had become undeniable. They were more than just companions, they were his friends, and he would do whatever it took to keep them safe. Zachary had already prepared a small bag with supplies he might need, some food rations, a portable energy source, and a few other essentials. He had planned the escape meticulously, but he still felt nervous. He wasn't a master strategist, he was just a soldier. But he knew one thing. He wouldn't let the Federation control his life any longer. As the evening approached, Zachary went over the plan in his mind again. Carla had managed to get him access to a small transport ship, one that was not under direct Federation control. She would disable the tracking system on the station's main systems, giving him a small window of time to escape undetected. The escape route was simple enough: leave the station undetected, take the transport ship, and head for the nearest uninhabited planet. Once there, they could regroup, find a new life away from the Federation, and try to figure out their next steps. But even with all the preparation, Zachary couldn't shake the feeling that something could go wrong. The Federation wasn't stupid. They had resources, and if they wanted to catch him, they would. As he packed the last of his things, he looked over at Treshka, who was fiddling with a piece